Did we have any idea from the lawyers what we're looking at as sort of like a worst case scenario? I was hearing Richard today talking to BitBoy, and he made the point that the SEC is non-criminal, and I'm thinking that what that means usually is even when this goes completely pear-shaped, you're looking at a fine of some sort. But I don't know that to be the fact. I'm out more
So,
asking that question. And then
so
the next, yeah. Oh, hold on. The second part of it is, he pointed out with the SBF thing, that's probably the SEC is not the way to go. It's to go prove all the fraud that was done, all the financial fraud, moving the money, which to me also sounds dead right. And I'm just thinking we're not going to anything like that here, like because we all know there was nothing, there was no money being given to any of us by anybody. Yeah, go
let
ahead.
me clarify something here. This has absolutely nothing to do with any of the personal subpoenas. This has absolutely nothing to do with any of the subpoenas that my companies or entities received. Those are all being handled personally. Those are not what this is about. This is about taking the evidence that we have, the representation that we've been offered, and going to the SEC with the proof that we have so far, with the HEX Investment Trust being created, with the legal opinion that has been wrote, that has already been submitted to the SEC for not necessarily approval, but the process that the PPM and all of our scrutiny, basically KYC of all of us that are involved, is required in order to create the HEX Investment Trust. With all the evidence that we have and the people that we have that are looking at this, this is strictly about going to the SEC and having a court of law look at all this evidence and say, HEX is not a security and we want that declaration. That's what this is about. This has absolutely nothing to do with the SEC's scrutiny of us personally. This legal defense fund is not for that. It's not part of that. This is completely separate. This is something different. I want to make sure that that's clarified and that people understand that this isn't about my personal representation. This is about representation for the HEX community to go out to the SEC and ask for this for HEX, for HEX's sake and for all of our sakes.
So to Famous's point, and again, just taking the information that I've come to know and believe and propagating an opinion, what this all comes down to is Section 5 of the SEC regulations. And it comes down to a sale of an unregistered security. And there are a few outcomes that can be imposed as penalties. Outcome number one, you have to refund everybody their money, or at least offer to have the money refunded to everybody. Outcome number two, there is a cease and desist. Outcome number three is you have to go through the registration of being a security. Outcome number four, which when outcome number three happens, a fine is also usually imposed with that. And outcome number four, and I believe they can just hit you with a hefty fine. I'm not sure about outcome number four, but the other three outcomes I know are the potentialities of what can happen.
So two is not possible. One's really not, doesn't really make any sense. Like it doesn't really work either. And three seems like the only option. So worst case scenario, we're looking at some sort of fine, and we move on with our lives. That's okay. I've been fined before.
Well, that's the thing about number one is like, okay, let's say they tried to apply the, and number one being returning the funds. Let's say they applied that. That obviously, or most likely, wouldn't apply to HEX, but it could possibly potentially apply to pulsechain. But then the
Yeah.
question becomes very sticky of, okay, it's not people anymore, it's wallet addresses and it's crypto assets. So do you
Yeah.
refund a one-to-one? Like if they sent me one ETH, do I refund one ETH? Do I refund market value?
But I want everyone to understand that this is strictly about HEX itself. And the reason for bringing this up is that in all of the subpoenas that have gone out, in their investigation that they are claiming that they're doing, HEX was named in it. I'm not saying that this has anything to do with Pulse and pulsex because we can only, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? HEX right now is defensible. HEX has the best legs to stand on with all this. So all the other stuff right now is kind of like back burner. We need to go after them for HEX and keep it focused on that, because we can get in a big conundrum trying to bring everything else into it. But this is strictly about HEX.
You know, I don't know a lot about the SEC. I was just wondering, like, what they could actually do to the code. I mean, even if they did succeed in this, it seems like if they don't do criminal investigations, the most we're looking at is a fine, like Famous said. But what can they actually do? Can they do anything to the actual code?
They're not coming after. They've named HEX in their investigation, but we don't know if they're coming after HEX. We don't know yet until the Freedom of Information Act gives us more info on what it is exactly they're trying to do. So we got to realize that this is us going at them and asking them for something, because they've named HEX, and by naming HEX, that puts all of us in a position to go after them and say, hey, wait a second, you're doing damage to all of us as a community because we're invested in this. Right. So we want you to either say why you're going after it, or say that it's a security, or go after it as a security, or say that it's not, because we have all the evidence to the contrary.
Right. No, I get all that. I guess my question is just like, what can they, like, let's just say they say, fuck y'all, and this is a security. What happens to the code? What happens to the code?
Nothing. They can't do anything to the code. Code exists and they can't touch the code. It's just like Bitcoin. They can't change it. They can't stop it.
So then what actually would happen then?
Well, the only thing they could do is levy fine on whoever they think they can levy fine on. Okay. And that's all that this civil case does. It's not criminal court. This isn't criminal case law. This is civil case.
Right. So it would just be a one-time fine and then move on.
Well, you never know what they're going to do, and to speak of things like that is giving. So, like, let's just say we as a community all start yelling and screaming, they're not going to do anything. They only did this to EOS. They're only going to do that to us. We can keep doing what we want. A judge doesn't have to go by precedent. A judge can go, you know what? You guys knew, the community knew, you guys continued to promote this thing, and we're not going to slap you on the hand like we slapped them on the hand. We're slapping you double hard because you knew better. So we've got to be very careful about our vernacular and how we speak about this. For instance, Look at the library case. Library got hit hard. Library was out there wearing shirts that said "fuck the SEC" on. Not a smart thing to do when you're going into courtrooms and stuff like that, because it changes opinion of you. When you go in there and you go in there with confidence, you go in there with structure, and you go in there with legal opinions, and you go in there with the law on your side and with integrity, you have a better leg to stand on than going with your middle fingers up into the face of the authorities. That doesn't sit well. They can do whatever they want. They don't have to go lenient on you. If you do have case and you do have precedent, then you may fare better if you act accordingly also.